When disasters and emergencies strike, turn to KGO to stay informed and up to date. The Bay Area's news station is KGO 810.
Good Saturday morning. Matt Ray, KGO Radio 810. We're taking your calls at 415-808-0810. 8080-810 is the number. Do you agree with the Trademarks Office decision to cancel the Redskins trademark? You can chime in at 8080-810. In the meantime, what's going to happen to the Redskins now that the Patent and Trademark Office said the team's federal trademarks will be canceled? For questions like that, we check in with trial attorney Mazen Spady. The website is stecklerlaw.com. Mazen, thanks for joining us. As always, we appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt, for having me again.
What happens here with the Redskins? First of all, talk about the decision and then what it means to the team.
The decision was essentially the appellate board of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office determined that they believe the term Redskin is a slur or an invective that's based upon race. It fell under a regulation that they have that says you cannot patent something that's a slur or a derogatory term or a curse word, for example. And so they stripped them of the trademark right, of the trademark registration. What happens to the Redskins next is a very long, drawn-out appeal. We're probably looking at least 5 years for this thing to go up through a court of appeals. First, it's going to get retried at the federal district court level. Then it'll go up to a court of appeals and maybe even the Supreme Court. Pending that entire period of time, the registration of the trademark stays. And if the Redskins, if their lawyers are any indication, what they're probably doing right now is at the same time of their appeal, they'll be shoring up all of their state trademark registrations, as well as shoring up a lot of their contractual provisions. Because the truth is, you don't need a registered trademark to sue for trademark infringement.
So there, if I'm reading correctly what you just said, their registration's still valid. It wasn't canceled. It won't be canceled until the case is over, basically, correct? If even that.
That's correct. It's
okay.
Assuming it goes up and down the appeal and there's an affirmation, it's not until the end of that does the right actually get extinguished.
How long do they have to file a petition?
About 30 days usually is the typical time. They can ask for extension so they can get their ducks in order. I wouldn't be surprised if they ask for an extension, and they usually get it.
So this was really, I mean, if I'm hearing you correctly, this was really just kind of a statement made by the board.
Exactly. It does deprive them. I mean, assuming that the registration cancellation sticks, it takes away some shortcuts. It takes away some rights, but in no way really removes the ability of the Redskins to use their name Redskins or even to use their old logo.
I see.
A lot of that is the product of contract law and just the market.
So they may have a difficult time protecting the name and logo if other people want to use them without permission.
That's right. It may be a lot more difficult. It probably would be a little bit more expensive. Litigation is a little bit more drawn out. Sometimes a lot more drawn out when you don't have a registered trademark. But then you have to prove a whole series of things. Where this could go wrong for the Redskins is if a court were to adopt the USPTO's opinion that this is not a trademarkable thing, and somehow that vitiates any trademark, even an unregistered one. That's a little bit unlikely given the way the regulations and the statutes are written, but it's still a possibility. That would be the biggest threat in the long run.
We're speaking with trial attorney Mazen Spady, the trademark office here, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, saying the Washington Redskins federal trademarks can be canceled, right? I mean, that's basically what they're saying. This thing was petition filed by 5 Native Americans, the agency ruling 2-1. Do you see anybody overruling this? I mean, possibly overruling this? I mean, if this is coming down, there's so much pressure right now for them to change their name. Do you see anybody overruling this thing?
You know, I wouldn't be surprised if a district court overruled it. There's a couple of good avenues that the Redskins are going to have, public pressure aside. You know, just speaking strictly about the law and the way the law breaks down, number one, it's unclear why the people who brought this case to the Patent and Trademark Office have standing to challenge the name. Without being callous and as abhorrent as the name might be, being a Cowboys fan, I can tell you as a sort of a sidebar, I didn't lose a second's sleep that they lost their trademark. But
you probably called them other things than the Redskins, I would imagine.
Exactly. I never called them the Redskins anyway. But the base of it, the basics of it is that the Redskins have a registered trademark, and so they're going to be able to enforce it all the way through the appeal. But in terms of it getting overturned, the standing issue is going to be a big reason it's going to get overturned if it does. Another reason is that there could, a court could see the term Redskins more contextualized and side with the Redskins that this is a contextualized usage, and therefore it's not being used in a way that's intended or supposed to be offensive.
Well, if this thing sticks, I mean, are we looking at other schools having to change their name as well? I know, you talk about high schools, and I know that they obviously don't have a stake in merchandise or anything like that, but there are a lot of other high schools out there. There are a lot of other teams out there that still use the name Redskins. What about, I don't know, what about the Chicago Blackhawks? What about the Atlanta Braves? I mean, do you think this is kind of the start of something?
I'd be surprised if any of those teams, including the Redskins, if they changed their name, I would be surprised if it was simply because the trademark office declined to register or to recognize the trademark. I think it's going to be a lot more from the grassroots and, like you mentioned earlier, market pressure on them to change their name, either a boycott or just enough pressure and enough of the market speaking out saying we don't like the name anymore. You're going to lose money by keeping the name, and then it ends up being a business decision to keep the name or not keep the name. What's going to make them the most amount of money? I hate to say it that way, but that's generally how these things break down in the end. Mazen
Spady's our guest. He's a trial attorney. The website is stecklerlaw.com. As a Cowboys fan, he has no problem with what happened to the Redskins this past week. Mazen, we appreciate your time as always. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt, for having me. Have a good one.
You too. 415-808-0810 is the number, 808810. Do you agree with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office that said Washington Redskins, their trademarks will be canceled? I mean, they could still use them. Everything's okay right now. This is all pending an appeal, but, there's a larger situation going on here. Think about the pressure that's been put on the Redskins to change their name. And so do you agree with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office decision? And where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? I mean, is this the start of something bigger? You can chime in at 808810. You can also follow the conversation on Twitter at MattRayTalk. It is 11:45 at KGO, the place to turn for traffic on the fives. And let's toss it over to Jane St. John at the KGO traffic desk.
Thanks. In the East Bay, westbound 80 before Gilman, the right shoulder is blocked by a wreck, and the East Shore Freeway is stop and go from Powell back to Cutting. Westbound heading in.